How's it going, everyone? My name is True Wonder Dog, and for the first time ever, we're actually reviewing a movie on this channel. A big thank you to WB for letting me look at this movie early so I can make this review. The first thing I want to talk about is this film is very pretty. As someone who's worked in animation for over 7 years now, I really appreciate how awesome this film looks in motion. I really don't think the trailers actually do it any justice because it ranges from good to great, and there are some dips in animation from time to time, but it's never like Dragon Ball Super where you can't recognize the characters. In fact, the art design overall is actually very consistent. The animation itself just tends to vary from time to time, but for the most part it's really good. In fact, there are a few moments in the film where the art style will completely change its style, and it's really awesome. Now, the main art style itself definitely does borrow from the old original Mortal Kombat cartoons, though thankfully once again the animation is 1,000 times better. And I'm sure a lot of you already expect this, but the film is very gory. In fact, at times it's more violent than the actual games. Once again, the trailers really don't do it any justice. There are parts of this film where characters just get absolutely pulverized or turned into like brisket. They're chopped up so much. Now, of course, the film isn't just constant violence. There are some character developing moments, there's some exposition here and there, and some good building for the story. But at the same time, for any of you watching that were worried the film might not be violent enough, don't worry at all. There's more than enough violence, and at some points, once again, it's even more violent than the games. And next up, I wanted to talk about the story. So this film basically covers the events of the first Mortal Kombat game with a couple of creative changes here and there. Most of which I actually did think was a good idea, but a couple of retcons really didn't sit well with me. But don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything in this review. Now, since this film does cover the events of the first game, you don't see too many characters outside of that, with Kitana and Quan Chi being the only real exceptions. Oh, and also Nitara. She doesn't really do very much. She's only in there for a couple of shots, but even so, I find it to be a very interesting pick because she doesn't really show up until Deadly Alliance. But once again, outside of those 3 characters, you don't really see anybody outside of the first game, which might sound a little bit disappointing at first, but keep in mind that means even more character possibilities for the future sequels. So that's just the overall plot for the film, but next up I wanted to talk about the individual characters and how they're portrayed in this movie. So of course we gotta start things off with Scorpion. The film is named after him, so of course he gets a majority of the screen time. But with that said, it's really only at the start of the film. After that, he does take a back seat every now and then to the other main characters and heroes of Earthrealm. But when it comes to the very start of the film, it definitely is all about Scorpion. We see his tragic backstory, and perhaps the most interesting of all, we see how he actually fights demons in the Netherrealm and does eventually become Scorpion. And a minor side note, during that entire scene, he looks just like Samurai Jack from the final season, and I was freaking loving that the entire time. So in summary, even though the movie is named after Scorpion, it's not like X-Men Origins Wolverine where it's 99% him. There actually is plenty of other time for the other characters as well. So next up, let's talk about Sonya. So for starters, no Ronda Rousey, and that's a pretty good start. But all jokes aside, this is some quality Sonya in this movie. She's fierce, she's a badass, and just enough sassiness to make her feel human and not a stoic statue. There's even a really great emotional scene in the film where she's tearing up, and I really love that. It made her feel very human. She's not just a strong warrior, she also cares deeply for the fellow soldiers, and she will stop at nothing to keep Earthrealm safe because that's the kind of person she is. And then there's Johnny Cage, who thankfully is not just the comedic relief. In fact, he's actually the heart of the film. He really does bring the humanity into pretty much every scene that he's in, and don't get me wrong, he's also funny as well, but he really is the heart of the movie. Now with that said, he does do a bit less fighting than the other main characters, but he does get a couple of fight scenes and they're very fun and over the top, due in no small part to his amazing charisma in this film. He really does feel even more fun and enjoyable than he is in the games. And now let's talk about the champion of Mortal Kombat, Liu Kang. Liu Kang's personality in this film feels very true to the games. He really does care about Earthrealm. He's trained his entire life for this tournament and nothing is going to stop him. And as a result, he gets to beat up a lot of enemies. In fact, the only person who kills more characters than him is probably Scorpion. Outside of that, Liu Kang is fighting the most people, which makes sense. Now, unfortunately, there is a pretty big change to his lore that I didn't really appreciate at all, but outside of that, Liu Kang's really awesome, fun personality, beats up a lot of guys. I love watching him fight. And how about the Thunder God himself? So Raiden in this movie is stronger than I have ever seen him in any of the games or any previous films. He might not be allowed to compete in the actual tournament, but there are a couple of moments where he gets to beat people up and you know right away he's pretty much unstoppable. And I really am talking Superman level strength, where if he just flicks you, he can obliterate you. But at the same time, the film does a good job making him feel mysterious and humble because he only speaks when he needs to, as opposed to constantly giving exposition and dialogue like in the games. There's even a couple of great moments where he smirks, which reminded me of the live action movie, and I loved Raiden in that film, so that was a great callback. In summary, Raiden is the strongest person on the island, and he lets everyone know that while also being humble and very mysterious. They really pulled that off super well in this movie. And last but not not least, for the heroes, we have Jax. Now, he doesn't have a ton of screen time, but he actually is a big motivation for a lot of the heroes in the story. And of course, we also get to see why he needs metal arms in the games and the possible sequel. However, the way he loses those arms is very different in this film. And honestly, I thought it was very clever because not only have we never seen it happen that way before, but it's also a clever callback to the live action movie, so very well done. And there's also a nice flashback between him and Sonya, which helps us understand the relationship a little bit more. And that's basically it for the characters aside from the villains, but with the exception of Quan Chi, they don't really matter that much. Instead, they pretty much are there to get their butts kicked by the heroes and not much else, which is a bit unfortunate if you're someone like me who's a huge fan of the villains and the heroes. But even so, the villains do get some really good hits in and have some pretty cool moments, so even though most of them are there to lose, they don't get steamrolled by the heroes. There actually is a pretty good fight, they get some good hits in there, and it's always intense and fun. But it is worth mentioning that Quan Chi is much more evil in this film than I think he's ever been in past games. He truly does say some really messed up things to certain characters. It's very evil. In fact, I would say the Quan Chi in this movie actually really enjoys being evil, and in fact, he also enjoys fighting as well, which I think is a pretty big contrast to how he acts in the games, because in the games, I always felt like he wanted to avoid fighting if possible and just kind of manipulate things from the background while remaining in the shadows. And don't get me wrong, he does do a lot of that in this movie as well, but he seems to really enjoy fighting, and once again, he also really enjoys being evil and just being a jerk to pretty much everybody. However, there was one character who I think definitely did deserve some more screen time, and that was Bi-Han, the original Sub-Zero. The film does a really good job hyping up the fight between him and Scorpion, but when the fight finally does happen, it's honestly quite short. It's over very quickly, and there's not much to it after that, not much Sub-Zero. He doesn't really show any of his character, and there's no development for him, but he does use ice powers, and they're very fun to watch, so he does have that, but I wish he had some more screen time. Overall, I think this film was very solid, and I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 9 out of 10, especially if you're a die-hard Mortal Kombat fan. Once again, there are some lore changes here and there that might upset you, but it's still the best Mortal Kombat movie there is right now. Once again, this film has everything for you to love. It's got tons of gore and violence, very solid animation, the voice acting is top-notch, and the story is just deep enough with a couple of creative changes. In fact, once the film was over, I just wanted it to keep going. I wanted even more of the film. I wished it was like a half hour longer, though thankfully there are a bunch of cliffhangers, so chances are we might get a sequel. Once again, I highly recommend this film if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, or if you just like fun, violent animated films in general, it's definitely for you. Don't get me wrong, the original live action film is also really good, but it really doesn't hold a candle to Scorpion's Revenge. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please leave a like down below, really do appreciate it. And also feel free to comment your thoughts on the film, but please try to keep spoilers out of the comments section. I really don't want them down there. And finally, why not keep that combo going by subscribing and ringing that bell? That way you never miss a future video. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.